welcome back everybody. We're here for one last video about topic 2.3, which is competitive market equilibrium. And we're going to think about this idea of a market equilibrium in a little bit different way than we have before. So this diagram you're seeing here, this might look pretty familiar, right? This is basically showing the idea of a market equilibrium, which has two opposing forces, with the law of demand and the law of supply being equal to each other, and at that point consumers and producers have agreed on a price and a certain quantity of goods or services to move, okay? So what we might not realize here is that this is a lead into a topic that is going to be a very big influence down the road as we keep covering the curriculum. But one point we want to make sure we know is this idea of allocative efficiency, right? So basically, when supply and demand meet each other, we have this idea of allocative efficiency. So now, in other words, the market, for whatever good or service we're talking about here, is allocating the resources, all of the productive resources, in the most efficient way possible. So that means a couple things. Number one, that producers are producing exactly what the consumers want, right? So they are making what is needed, right? And also they are making exactly the right amount of what is needed, right? So they're not only making the right thing, but the market is also making the right amount of things, right? So you might notice that our supply and demand curves are not labeled here, and I've done that on purpose. Obviously, we know this is supply, and this is demand. Now, we're going to refer to supply and demand with a little bit different terms here, because, as you may have picked up, this video is about marginal cost and marginal benefit. So let's think about what marginal cost means, right? That idea of, so the word marginal means the idea of producing one more or consuming one more thing. Okay, so in this case, the marginal cost is the cost to the producer to produce one more good or one more service, right? And basically we can show that with a supply curve. Basically, supply is marginal cost, because it is upward sloping, right? And we know through our assumptions of the law of supply that supply is showing the cost to produce one more thing as we go this way, right? So let's think about that idea of marginal benefit, right? Cost is pretty easy to understand, but another word for benefit that we might know is utility, right? And that is the benefit or the satisfaction or the reward that consumers get for consuming a good or service, right? And the more goods and services they consume, the greater their benefit will be, right? So what is the benefit to the consumer of consuming one more thing? That is marginal benefit. Again, similar to supply, it's the same thing as demand. Now, when marginal cost, the cost of producing one more thing, is equal to the marginal benefit, or the benefit to the consumer of consuming one more thing, then we have this idea of allocative efficiency, and this is why markets are so efficient. Now, looking ahead to one of our future topics, when we're talking about market failure, right? Markets are not always this perfect, right? They're not always this efficient. Looking ahead to market failure is when we no longer achieve allocative efficiency. So we can probably think of some good examples of some products that we have too many of. There's too much production. So usually these are things that have a negative influence on our world, right? So that could be like cigarettes, alcohol, fossil fuels, right? All of those things, I think we can probably agree, we make too many of them, right? So the market the market for those things is making too many, right? So in other words, we are somewhere out here, right? In other words, the market is overproduced, or you could say as well it's overconsumed, right? Anything past here is no longer allocatively efficient because too many resources, too much consumer money, and too many factors of production from the producers are being allocated to make something beyond the point at which it's allocatively efficient to do so. On the other hand, you can probably think of some things that we don't have enough of, right? Or as in the market is not making enough of them. So that might be like vaccines, right? We're recording this in the beginning of September. There's a lot of news out there about a vaccine for the coronavirus. We could all really use one of those right now. The market's not making enough of those right now. They're hardly making any, right? They're still in the testing phase. So healthcare is one. I think we could all be more educated, no matter who you are. So I think education is another example of something that is underproduced. Healthcare is underproduced. You might think of some different types of healthy food, right? Like maybe some organic food, right? All of that is underproduced. So if we're here, right, if we're to the left of our allocatively efficient point, we're not making, the market is not, for whatever reason, is not making enough of what we need and what we want. If we're producing to the right of the allocatively efficient point, then the market is over-allocating resources to that good or that service, okay? So, like if we're here, if we're at this point, the marginal cost, right, to the producer is going to be much greater than the marginal benefit, right? So a good example I like to use here is potentially retakes are not allocatively efficient, because what might be the best use of your time is to focus on the next test and do well on that, because there's a significant cost to doing a retake. You have to relearn the material. You have to physically retake the test. You have to study more. And you're giving up all of those resources that you would have to do well on your next assessment, right? So it's for that reason, I think the marginal cost, right, the cost to the student to attempt a retake can be greater than the marginal benefit, right? Especially if you're not going to see that big of a grade increase from doing this retake, right? Then your marginal benefit would be smaller, and you'd have to do a whole lot of work with marginal cost to do that retake, all right? So to wrap this one up, right, demand and supply are respectively marginal benefit and marginal cost. And when we are in equilibrium, we are allocatively efficient. Society is producing just the right type and just the right amount of goods and services. However, markets are not perfect. Some markets have goods and services that are underproduced. Some have things that are overproduced. So this is a bit of a head to look at our topics down the road of market failure, but it is addressed on the curriculum for 2.3. All right, thanks guys.